Now we're going to talk about some common ways that people tend to approach the keyboard as they begin to work, as they begin to mouse. We're going to look at some common habits that people have so that you have a notion of what some of the varieties are, and then we're going to talk about why some are better than others. Okay, so the most common that you'll probably see is that people just act out of their habit. They just sit, and it's just the plop and put. They just go. It happens very quickly because they're not trying to do it in a particular way. They're just, okay, I've got to type, got to do my work, got to get started coding, whatever it is. It's just plop and put. Now, this is what you're trying to move away from while you're in this course. You're trying to develop a much more conscious model of how to do it so that you'll understand what are some of the levers that I can pull that change the quality, the aesthetic quality, the movement quality of my experience. So that's the plop and put. That's just pure habit, no strategy. Some people actually sit pretty well. They have their posture pretty decently organized and they sit down, nice and tall, well supported. But then somewhere along the way, as they bring their arms forward, they collapse. So they start off nice, but then they round in their back and place their arms there. You can see just how the whole long support disappears as the arms go forward. It's very common as you're going to get things that you bring your head closer to where your hands are. This is part of life. But you can see it here. The person starts off well, but then for some reason, rather than just maintaining the length of their spine while the arms are coming forward, the top collapses or the lower back rounds out behind them, whatever it is. This is also very common with the kind of computer I have here, which is the screen height is lower, like a laptop or an iPad or something like this. Rather than the screen height up here, sometimes people are encouraged more to maintain the length of their spine when their eye line is a little bit higher. Although it is not uncommon for people to have the screen at a nice height and over the course of the day to simply collapse the spine out from under and keep typing away as they look at the screen with their back completely rounded. So don't think that any one little tweak saves the day. Another version of what I commonly see is that people actually, in the way that they're already set up on the chair, creates or necessitates certain strategies, certain problems. And often it's that people are sitting on the back of the pelvis. They have their tailbone kind of pulled forward underneath them. They're not really on their sit bones, and I'm going to show you the relevant anatomy in just a moment. But you can see how I'm kind of rocked back here on my pelvis. That tends to both compress me down and also pull me away from what's in front of me. And some people sit like this for long periods of time. But often what happens, even when a person like this tries to have better posture, they end up not using the mobility of the base of support. And instead, they do this. They just try to jack their back up. They try to strain from the lower back. They try to make the effort there without really changing the pelvis very much. And then they hold this for long periods of time, or sometimes days, or sometimes years. And certain bad pathologies can result, pressure on the discs and problems of that nature. So you really want to understand how the base of support and the accuracy of the aim that you have there sets up the rest of the spine to already have something under it, the support, the portare, the carrying from below, that's already established. You not only get the stability of the base, but then when you want to move your spine forward, much of the articulation is actually done using the pelvis around the hip joints. And again, I will talk about the relevant anatomy in just a moment. But look at it just visually. So much of this stuff is hidden inside, and unless you've been shown the anatomy or you've studied some particular practices, you may not know about this. But it's very important just to get the visual. Look at the difference between this here, and I'll keep my hands right where they are, and now I will tuck my pelvis back under me. Now notice my head, I'm still keeping my head more or less on the horizon, but the whole shape of my back has completely changed underneath my head. And so now, because my back is so far behind me, the muscles at the back of my neck are, I can feel them now. They're much more tight because they're having to hold my head up on the horizon without the spine actually being underneath it. So watch what changes as I change the organization of the pelvis underneath me. And this is a little trick you can perform at your desk. If you want to play along, you can press pause and try that sort of thing where you kind of walk your pelvis back out from under you. Now I have the bones at the bottom of the pelvis much more clearly pointing down into the chair, and that provides a certain kind of length for my spine, a certain kind of lift. I now am much more like the glass of milk. I can release the weight down, and I get the nice rising reflection coming back up through me. You know? Some people, as they get tired, this is the position they gravitate to. The pelvis may not be so tucked up underneath them all the time, but they start relatively good and they gradually decay over a long work session like this. Again, the more the back rounds out behind me, the heavier my arms start to feel, the more practical it seems to rest my wrists on the edge of the desk. So this kind of cascade, this kind of vicious circle of elements, it's like this compositional decay that creates so many of the issues that we tend to feel up in the shoulders and the neck and then eventually out in the hands and the fingers. So that's the basic idea. Those are a couple of versions of how people tend to approach the keyboard. You might try to figure out what yours is the next few times that you come to sit down, whether it's at the kitchen table or it's at your desk, is to just take a moment to pause and to feel, how am I doing it? And then in slow motion, just bring your hands towards the keyboard. And if you feel yourself collapsing to bring your hands forward, that'll give you some useful information about where you are in your understanding of your habits. Or you can take a moment to change the aim of your sit bones into your chair and then test and see, well, that's different. That's a different place to move from. Why don't I do that more often? And you'll start to understand the nature of interrupting your habits sometimes so you can train yourself in a different direction. So now let's look at some of the relevant anatomy of the hip joints and the pelvis and understand a little bit more on the inside what's taking place, so you'll know what it feels like and why.